Hi, so today we're going to go over Module 5, Conversations That Build Trust. Obviously, I have it down here, so I'm going to be looking down. Ideally, I'd have it more practiced, but, I'm going to do my best. All right, so Conversations That Build Trust. Um, so we're going to look at the goals and objectives of our conversation. We want to make sure that we have clear goals that we can achieve. I like to use the SMART goals. That's specific. We're saying exactly what we want to achieve. It's not just I want soil health. I want to use cover crops to increase my organic matter by this much. So SMART, measurable. So how much are we trying to increase our organic matter? Going on that same system, or how much of our field do we want to have covered in cover crops established? How much biomass do we want to grow from this? You get it. Achievable, something realistic. Look at what people have done in the past. Don't try to cut all fertilizers next year when you've been on full conventional. That's probably not going to work. Relevant to what you're doing farming, so keep it relevant. And then, we're not trying to change the world or something. We're just trying to get your farm on track, right? Then time bound, we're doing this next year. So that's with goals. I like to keep those, in that SMART goal. Thinking about it that way helps make goals that are relevant and achievable, right? So, and hopefully having these goals in mind can increase our confidence and get us closer towards practice adoption. When we're talking with people, we want to have a lot of confidence about what we're talking about. People care a lot, not intentionally care, but confidence matters. And as we see, sometimes confidence can matter more than knowledge. Of course, I hope you're knowledgeable too, but you need to be confident in what you're knowledgeable about. So we're gonna have participants. We need you guys to understand the social norms. Farming is very community based, very personal to people. So we need to keep it personal with our conversations. Try to zero in on that aspect of it. And then objective 2, participants will feel more confident having conversations about conservation with a peer in a way that builds trust and mutual support. So that's what we want to get you to, is having that confidence by the end of this module. That's kind of our objective, our goal. By the end of this module, you will have increased your confidence talking about starting these conversations. Okay, so introduction to the trust building conversations. We're building trust through relational organizing. So relational organizing is something that started in the political sphere. It's just about creating a personal relation so that you can get in past the barriers people might have to ideas, and instead looks at you as a person, somebody that they trust, telling them something that they can rely on. You can't just start in full bore rush trying to get somebody to change everything about their operation. Say you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong. You need them to look at you as somebody that is trustworthy, that is reliable, that they can trust with their operation, their livelihood, their lives, right? So we're using the conversation as a tool to build trust and mutual support, which can lead to change in action. Or harness our personal networks and relationships, leverage the influence of peers. So this is really important. So this is why networking is so important. Going to your field days, going to events, meeting people, is that you can, they meet people, they know people. You can say people's like, hey, Natalie sent me your way. And that instantly creates a connection of, oh, this person talked to somebody that I know and trust, and they told them to come here. So that is a great way to get started, is just looking at your network and following the seeds, following the threads between people to people they know. Whatever your jurisdiction is, statewide, countywide, everybody through a couple of connections. I promise you, especially in this specific world, conservation or farming. It's not a huge world. You can get to everybody through just a couple connections. You got to follow those leads. And then originally used in politics. Yeah, I started with that one. Okay. So I'm going to move on to the one-on-one conversation. So we want these to be intentional conversations, right? So you're coming into the conversation and you want the person to know, at least first and foremost, that you're having this conversation because you have an objective in mind. Someone in your personal network. This isn't just something you're just coming across. You're got everybody in a mindset that we're going to talk about this and we're going to come to some sort of a, I don't know, solution, some sort of a outcome. All right. The objective is to build relationships with them by understanding what matters to them and where they might be common ground. So this is really important because, especially with farming, this is people's business. Every farmer is a business owner. They may not own their land, but they own their operation. It's a very identity-based thing. Their father, their grandfather probably farmed in a lot of cases. And even if they didn't, they got into it because they wanted to change who they were. It's always really related to their identity. So you really want to figure out what matters to them and why they're there, and follow those threads with lots of good questions. The purpose is to understand the other person and their why. So in the end goal is to help that person move towards making a change. So you really want to ask, I think you can start with, like, if, let's say it's somebody whose father farmed the land, is it, what did you keep from your dad that he did well? What is something that you've changed already that he didn't do that you had to change? And that gets them in that mindset of, oh yeah, there was things my dad did that I didn't like, that I do differently now, that works better for me. And I'm probably not better than my dad, so there's probably more things that could be changed. And you don't want to quite frame it that way. You just have to get into that, trying to get them to think about, like, how are you keeping tradition alive and how have you already changed it? And I'm sure most people are probably not farming exactly the way their dad did in the 80s. So at least you can get them in that mindset of, yeah, things are already going differently, so we can continue to be different. So who is this person? So you want to understand the three things. Who is this person? What do they value? What makes them tick? And then you need to find out, what do they want to see change? So we want to connect what they already value, these why questions. You want to try to connect them back with what you want to accomplish. So you're trying to get people into NRCS programs, you got to think, okay, NRCS programs can help you with that. NRCS programs can help you with that. If you want them to do cover crops, you have to say, yes, the cover crops can help you with that. So you have to figure out what they value and then try to tie it in to what you're trying to accomplish. And then what role can they see themselves playing in making that change? So this is the really thing. Is like, people might have heard ideas, but usually as conservationists, as outreach, our goal is to get people to take something they've heard about, they've thought about, and turn it into something that they're doing, right? So we have to learn something about them, how they already interact, what they're doing, what they care about, and figure out how we can make it easy for them to turn that idea into reality. And that's a very tough change to make. I know everybody here has had something that they've wanted for years, and then finally they got the door and it seems easy, but it was so hard to get started, right? The hard part's doing it every day, right? So the key features of these one-on-one conversations. So we're doing that 70-30. That's 70% of them talking, 30% of you talking. We want to focus on them and their operation and make them feel like they're the focus and not just going in this. We need to ask bold questions. So this with the bold questions one is where it's important that you know something about what you're talking about, right? You got to lean on your own experience and what you've already done to be able to ask the right kinds of questions. And that's something that just mostly comes with experience, but you'll get there. Focus on just a few things to talk about. So make sure you're remembering what your ask is. If you're in watersheds, keep it focused on watersheds. Try to relate things to watersheds. Cover crops, relating to cover crops. If you're trying to get people signed up to a specific program, and just keep it focused in your scope. And if they get too far off of that, that's where you can ask those questions that maybe tie them back to where you started. Ask the person to share their story rather than recite facts. So again, we want to ask, why are you farming? How did you get started? What was a challenge that you had to overcome, and what was the solution? And was that a one-time thing, or is that something that changed your operation forever? We want to get qualitative information from them about their experience to this point, because we're trying to carry them to their next experience, right? And then offer back pieces of your story of self. Again, this one's tough if you're newer to the game. I'm newer to the game. It's really tough and it's me offering something of myself, right? I'm new to this. I don't come from a farming background, but I'm very interested in it. I've worked with, I'm Dart, so giving you something of yourself and how you got here as well. Of course, try to keep it brief because we want them in that 70%, but I think you can find examples of where you can relate to them, and then continue carrying the conversation forward, and then end with an ask. This is such an easy thing to forget. It seems like you have this great conversation, and then you say, oh, that was awesome, and you shake their hand, and you walk away, and you realize you didn't give them their card, you didn't have them sign up for an email, you didn't tell them about the program, you didn't ask them to get back to you. And then also with that ask is, what happened here, is following up. Right, so you have this good conversation. Hopefully you got some information so you can contact them again, and then give them an email and say, hey, we had this great conversation. We covered this, this, and this. And so the next steps we were going to take is to do blank. So having that ask, that's again that specific thing that you're trying to get them to do. It's all great to have them think about conservation, but we need to get to those actions. Is conversations that are supposed to turn into actions here. So activity. So we're going to break up into groups, and we're going to try to figure out how to get these conversations going. So what you're going to think about in these groups is, how might we frame the invitation to a conversation? So again, we want these conversations intentional, so you're inviting people to talk to you. You need to make sure to frame it in a way of saying, how can we help your organization? How can we be a part of your journey? Trying to make it personal. How will you start the conversation? Have a good first intro of yourself, and then go right into asking them to talk about themselves. But you need to get that conversation started in the right frame. And then what context do we need to offer? I can't really give examples for that. There's so many different contexts. What questions will we use to get our partner talking? It's good to have a couple lists. I think every conversation is going to be different. You might find yourself having some same questions, and if you notice that, maybe you need to write them down. But just trying to keep those questions. I think asking about where they came from is a good start. How their education level, their family history on the property, all of that stuff. And then what topics should the conversation focus on? What related questions will help to get to know our partner? Kind of the same thing. What is our closing ask? And that's, again, very important, that closing ask. That should be something you have pretty well rehearsed. And I know it's tough because you don't want to seem canned, but at least you should know exactly what you're trying to ask for and exactly where to send them to get the next steps. That one is, a lot of these conversations will be differently, but that once you get to that ask, find a way to connect what you've talked about into the ask and how it'll help, and get to that next step. Discussion, starting the conversation. So what could prevent farmers from talking about conservation with neighbors? Social pressure. Trying something different can be hard in small communities. Everybody kind of sees what people are doing, and you don't want to be the weird guy. But, if you can be the leader, go take it from being the weird guy to being the leader. I think that can help a lot. How could they overcome the barriers? Reframing it, like I just said, from being the weird guy to the leader. What would drive a farmer to have these conversations? So that's an interesting one. I think farms land, they draw lines of I own this property, you own this property, but the land doesn't really care. So if your farmer is doing things and it's causing erosion or wind, bad water quality, the water runs over their land and floods onto your land. So there's definitely benefits to all being a part of the same community, all being a part of the same landscape, the same ecosystem. So that can usually be a motivating factor. And then maybe even just having pride that you made your community stronger, more resilient. Because a lot of these conservation programs, they seem like a cost, but the goal of them is to have a more resilient, independent farm that is more economically survivable. What are some natural conversation opportunities? Leasing time is a big one. People going to church, Sunday breakfast, before after church. There's a lot of things like this, and encouraging people to, you're talking to farmers, bring this up, send them my way. Be willing to talk about these new things. There's, whatever meetings they're a part of, sports games. They go and watch their kids play sports, and then they're talking with somebody during the game. What language could they use to start the conversation in these natural moments? So just kind of think about that. I don't know. I have an exact answer for that one. What kind of language to use? I heard something interesting. I had a conversation the other day, and I'm sure most people will just be interested to hear what you have to say because you brought it up. If you're in a community, somebody you trust. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to have specific goals in mind. We're trying to start conversations that connect to people's personal lives, and we are trying to end with an ask that gets them to turn thoughts into actions. So I think that's the lesson. Hopefully I didn't speak too fast or look at my screen awkwardly. I did one run through of this, so hopefully that was good enough. Thank you.